And we are live. With that, I want to say, hey, Jonathan, man, welcome to the Bitcoin Breakout and the Survival Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you today. I was reached out to by one of your associates on Twitter about having you on. I thought it would be interesting. The more I researched Bitwage, the more I thought this is an interview I'm really excited to do. So I want to dig into a couple different angles with this because you guys really do a lot more than just make sure people can get paid in Bitcoin if they want to. But can we start out with, what brought you personally to Bitcoin in the first place, Jonathan?
Yeah. So that story goes back to 2013. I was working at Oracle, and as being part of this 100,000 person machine, I really felt like I needed to do something more than just be a cog in the machine. So every day I looked up something new. I tried to find something, some kind of new technology, some kind of new thing to learn. And I came across Bitcoin on a TED Talk. I think it was called The Future of Money, Tide, Sweat, and Bitcoin. And I came out of that interview being very, enamored by financial sovereignty, banking the unbanked, creating more efficient international payments. And I went down that rabbit hole. I spent, a month or so learning what I could, reading the white paper. At the time, I was watching, some very crappily made videos by Andreas Antonopoulos. And I came out just this obsessed Bitcoin guy, right? And now here I am, I think it was still 2013, going around to people at Oracle being like, you got to buy Bitcoin, right? The price of Bitcoin, it skyrocketed from $200 to $1,000, right? And then Mt. Gox happened, and the whole market just crashed, just tanked. And at the time I had some very unhappy friends, right? Because they were buying at $700, $1,000, and now the price is $300 or whatever.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So they were upset at me at the time. Not much anymore, but it just so happened that there was another crazy Bitcoin guy at Oracle, and my coworkers connected the two of us. He was over at the technical side there. And we were like, okay, we want to be a part of this revolution with Bitcoin. How can we do it? And we were just looking at, what are the different aspects that Bitcoin touches in the financial ecosystem? There were exchanges for you to purchase it. There were wallets for you to store it. There were merchant processors so that you could spend it. But if you looked at the financial loop, you would then have the Bitcoin stuck there, and there was no way for those merchants to then spend that Bitcoin and essentially create a closed financial loop ecosystem, so such that Bitcoin could exist, right, in its own ecosystem. And so we wanted to be the first ones to do that. And the way that we facilitated that was through payroll, right? With payroll, you now have this full loop of, consumer spends it with merchant then pays employees then use that as a consumer to purchase things again, right? And that was our first product. I actually quit my job to go full-time on Bitwage back in 2014. And back then, this was a crazy idea, right? Companies were not ready to pay their employees in Bitcoin back then. But we did know through kind of scrolling Reddit and also calling, merchants that all, were accepting Bitcoin. We found out that there were people who wanted to receive part of their salary in Bitcoin. And so by the end of the year, we created a product that allowed any employee, any freelancer, any contractor who's receiving salaries from US companies to be able to receive any percentage of their paycheck in Bitcoin. And that kind of is what, created the beginnings of our business.
I think that's so smart because there's a lot of people that would like part of their salary or maybe even all their salary in Bitcoin. But if I work for a company that has, mid-sized company, 400 or 500 employees, and I'm going to some HR person trying to get them to shift over payroll, that's difficult. But if you create a way for me to do it independently, you tie into that market. Just as a total aside, when you were with Oracle, where geographically were you?
I was in San Francisco.
Oh, San Francisco. Because I'm in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. There's an Oracle campus in the middle of Arlington. It's like surrounded by suburbs.
Oh,
I don't
wow.
think people understand how big Oracle is because you can't see it. Like there's a gate and it looks like it's like a park or something, and you go into it and it's like a freaking college campus, and it's surrounded by all these suburbs and little businesses and all, and most people don't even know it's there. And it's like this like 3/4 mile road before you get to the first building. And that was back in the 90s that I was servicing that contract. I just thought that was an interesting aside. But yeah, you guys are able to like allow anybody, right? So anybody that's getting paid W-2 then basically?
Anyone, anywhere who receives any kind of salary from, actually now it's a US business, a Canadian business, a Eurozone business, a UK business, for anyone who's receiving. So you could be a W-2, you could be a W-9 contractor, you could be a W-8 Ben, which is just like, let's say you're a freelancer in Argentina or Brazil or Nigeria or the Philippines, and you are doing work for a business that's paying you from any of those countries I mentioned. You can sign up and use us today without those organizations signing up. And you can get whatever percentage you want between Bitcoin and various local currencies.
See, and that was, as I started researching you guys, that was an interesting thing that I really never thought of. Like if Bill in Georgia wants to get paid in Bitcoin, it's a convenience, but there's other options, I guess, maybe. If somebody's working out of, let's say, Brazil, and they're from the Philippines and working in Brazil, and they're getting paid by an American company or a Canadian company, there's a time lag in those funds being available. Where in the way that you do things, from what I understood from watching your YouTube channel, that person gets their money much more swiftly in the form of Bitcoin. They may not even want to keep it all in Bitcoin. They might want to do that just to expedite payments. Something to that effect.
And there's two versions of this expedition, right?
Okay.
The first version is there's a lot of intermediaries involved in the transaction when you do a traditional wire transfer. Because when you're moving money from one country to another, normally, so you start with your bank. If it is a major financial institution, it'll have a direct relationship with the Fed. If not, you might have to go through another institution to have a relationship with the Fed. Then money has to move across countries. There has to be a communication actually between the two central banks for that. And then you might also have an FX broker involved in that. And then now the money is in this large institution in this other country. And if you don't have a bank, that is a bank account with that large institution, it then has to move from that large institution to your account. A lot of times what may happen also in the process is the banks will intentionally delay the movement of the funds because they are making money on essentially loaning your money out for a day, right? So that in itself can cause delays. And this is typically like a 3 to 5 day kind of delay. But there are other issues that can be involved. For instance, any one of those intermediaries can do something wrong and lose your money, right? You could also do something wrong as the person inputting the details and lose the money. When that happens, what typically happens is the money gets stuck in some intermediary, and they don't really think about the money being stuck. And only the people at the ends sort of know that there's something wrong. They have to ask all the intermediaries to finally figure out what's happening and then get the money to move through the chain all the way back before you can resend it. Details. So this then turns into what can be like a 2-week plus process. And then the last point, actually, there's another part of the delay, which is in some of these countries, there's a level of bureaucracy to receive the money. So you might have to go to the bank and provide paperwork for like proof of the source of income or something along these lines. And so in addition to, the banks potentially losing your money, the banks themselves just being slow, you now have to also come in with paperwork. And if it's not done correctly, you might have to wait a day to do the paperwork and come back again. So all of that stuff basically goes away when you receive your salary in Bitcoin, right? Because all that's happening is we're moving money within, the United States when it comes to like the dollar portion of it, which is, not as fast as the fastest systems in the world, but is much faster than this complicated, deck. And then once it goes into Bitcoin, the rest is instant. So that's that's obviously a great value add there. There happens to be some other value adds in the process of just saving money generally as well. So a lot of people they'll get paid in Bitcoin, and then they'll store a part of that in Bitcoin because their local currency has some crazy amount of inflation involved. Sure. They want to hedge against that, so they'll have they'll keep 20% of it in Bitcoin. That saves them money, right? And then obviously there's less intermediaries involved, and because of that, we can also lower the rates in particular corridors. So there are very competitive corridors like US to Europe, very, very, very low fees. It tends to be actually a little bit cheaper to go through traditional rails than to go through Bitcoin rails. But if you're going, from a developed country to a developing country, that's where you can typically find some benefits in rates. And sometimes in places with hyperinflation, you can actually find like 20% or 50% premiums for periods of time for like 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. And we've been doing this since 2014. So we've seen this happen in like Brazil, in India, Nigeria, in Turkey, in Argentina, and in many other places.
Yeah, to that, there's a person asking now, what about Afghanistan? And I think your limitation is who's paying. So as long as it's a U.S. company, Canadian company, the others you mentioned, it doesn't really matter where the person's residing because Bitcoin is borderless, right? So persons you're asking, what about Afghanistan? You probably couldn't pay somebody from Afghanistan, but to Afghanistan, it's kind of irrelevant. It could be the moon if it was possible, right? Because it's a Bitcoin address that's receiving the funds in the end.
Yeah. So yes and no. From a technological perspective, yes, we can. But one thing that you got to remember is that we're still part of like the traditional financial system in that sure. we work with banks. And if we work with banks, there are certain rules that we have to follow. So it's not like we can just send to literally everyone because there are sanctions. And we have to follow sanctions because if we don't follow sanctions, our banks can get in trouble, and our banks are not willing to work with us if we're, essentially getting them in trouble. So, so from the perspective of, there's a government, it's putting a gun to the head of our banking partners, and we got to, for the sake of our banking partners, to let us continue doing transactions, we need to do things so that the person holding the gun doesn't shoot. Right. So that is the reality of what we live in. That being said, there's still a lot to play around with, right? We're not limited in terms of where we can pay as long as essentially we're not, skirting sanctions.
Yeah. So right now it'd probably be Russia too, right? So how big are you guys? You guys are bigger than I thought you were.
Yeah. So we've been around, like I said, we've been processing payroll since 2014. We're processing about $80 million a year. We've got 50,000 registered workers, 2,000 registered companies on the platform. Our team, we're about 30 people right now. And that it's actually a big difference. So we grew, a good amount from 2014 to 2017, and we kind of stagnated during that bear market. We stayed like a 10-person team. We were, being extremely scrappy. We were able to hit profitability for a few years, and then, after all the craziness around the pandemic, remote work became this huge thing. Like, the Bitcoin and crypto industries just like blew up. There's this phenomenon called the Great Resignation, where lots of people are basically saying, screw these crappy retail jobs or these corporate jobs. I'm going off by myself to do my own thing. And all these like HR organizations are now looking for new kinds of benefits to like hire and retain people. So all these things kind of came together, and we started to grow a lot. We doubled in 2020, in 2021, and we're looking to double again this year. We were able to close a seed round, and that allowed us to grow 3x our team, and we're looking to continue to expand.
Is it kind of a good mix of individuals and companies? Are companies starting to use you to where maybe you're becoming a competitor to a large payroll company like a Paychex or something like that?
So about half of our business is on the B2C product, and about half of our business is the B2B product, right? We will basically never be a competitor to a system like a Paychex or an ADP. We are synergistic with them. So we're actually not handling like the tax withholdings and the withdrawals. We plug in to these systems and integrate with these systems. So like, let's say you're a company and you want to offer us, we actually have a function that allows us to plug into the system so that you basically set it up and you don't have to think about it. I guess you do have to fund the payrolls. You have to actually give us the money, but besides that, you're it's completely automated. And we've done it in a way that's compliant. There's actually a regulation, the FLSA, the Fair Labor Standards Act, and that is like one of the main regulators of payroll in the United States, or regulations rather. And in this, it actually explicitly has a line that says that people must get paid in dollar or dollar equivalent. Like payroll must be done in dollar or dollar equivalent. And the interpretation is that Bitcoin is not dollar equivalent in this country. And so what we have technically done is we've built a system that wraps around that legal context of payroll. So if you want to be very technical, we are like a payroll salary benefit option as opposed to like direct payroll. You can fund with Bitcoin, we can pay out with Bitcoin, but in the middle, there's sort of like all these calculations happening in dollars and withholdings happening in dollars that needs to occur to maintain compliance. And
let me try to walk that through for people, because I think I get what you're saying. The actual payroll transaction, I'm paying Bill, that's done in dollars, taxes, FICA, benefits, all, and then a certain amount of it is converted into Bitcoin that goes to him to hold however he chooses to, and possibly, from what I saw, even within a 401k, which I think is cool as hell, and I like to hear you talk to that. But basically, the stuff that's done, when the calculations are done and the transfer is done for the .gov's approval and blessing, it's dollars, and then it turns, whatever portion thereof turns into Bitcoin.
Yes, exactly. Although it's important to mention that you can start with Bitcoin too. So you can fund the payroll with Bitcoin.
I got you.
And we can pay out the Bitcoin. But in the middle of this, right, that there has to be this dollar component. So you can't. So you can get into some more complicated things where you're actually like pricing payroll in Bitcoin. But there are just so many regulatory concerns around that. So for instance, like, again, it's all in dollars. So at the end of the day, even if you're like pricing someone's salary in Bitcoin, when you actually push it through the payroll system, it has to go back to dollars before it goes into Bitcoin again. And one of the key issues around here is minimum wage law. So like if you're pricing someone's salary in Bitcoin based off of a 60K Bitcoin, and you're like, you're doing this because I believe Bitcoin is going to be 100K or 250K or $1 million per Bitcoin, so they're getting a good deal in the long run, right? Because they've got long time preference, hopefully. Then that's all great. But if Bitcoin crashes from 60 to 20K, and you were pricing hourly wage at like $10 and minimum wage is $8 where you are, you're breaking the minimum wage law. So there are complications like that involved. So the way that we do it is like the simplest way to still be able to offer the benefit. And as much as I'd love to be able to price it in Bitcoin, the IRS and the DOL are just not ready for that.
No, and we're not ready. I know that's the dream, that everything will be priced in Bitcoin, but I think number has a long way to go up before volatility goes down sufficient to make that something that people will be in mass comfortable with. There's people that'll be comfortable with it today, but they're, even among Bitcoiners, I think they're minority. I do think it's interesting, though, that I can fund my payroll with Bitcoin, because there are companies that are either primarily Bitcoin companies as far as revenue in, or they actually take a lot of Bitcoin revenue in it. So that's an interesting take. I didn't even realize that was possible. I don't know how many people take advantage of it, but it's interesting that you've set it up to where you can do it. You have this dollar, the dollar compliance thing going on in the center because, yes, it's complicated. And I'm not an employer anymore. I'm a one-man show now. But as a former employer, and at one time I had a company with 50 employees and 1,200 contractors, I don't want to touch that. And I don't want to be responsible for it if it's wrong. I just want my people paid on time every time.
Yeah.
So
you don't want to think about it, right?
Yeah, I don't want it. No, I have enough to think about with 1,200 people all over the world that I don't want to think about, did my payroll go through, other than my job as an employer was to make sure that if the money needed to be funded by Thursday for Friday payroll, the Monday was freaking funded. That was my number. More important than anything else in my company, my people get paid. And so the person in the middle, I got to be sure they're going to do the job. We used paychecks. That's why I brought them up. So it's interesting that you're more in a symbiotic role to enable this rather than a directly competitive role.
Yes.
At least for now. What do you guys have in the pipelines coming up next? Like, where are you headed with all this?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question, right? I mean, so one of the key differentiators of what we do is that we don't have a wallet. We directly deposit into whatever wallet you provide to us. We're never in custody of your wallet, and we view this as a very important thing, right? It enables people to be their own bank, right? Which I think is very, very important. They don't have to be if they don't want. People can split between their savings Bitcoin and their checking Bitcoin. If some of them want to be partially degenerate, they could have it go on the exchange where they're trading the shit coins, and then they have the other part that they're saving, right? We can enable that, and we do it in a way that where we are never in the position of actively pushing to employees, to workers, you gotta trade this shit coin because it's going to the moon, or you gotta buy this NFT because of whatever reason. We're not in that position. You literally can't buy it with us. You can't store it with us. We can't lose your money. We can't, it's not like, you can get 12% stake on 0% of the money that you're going to get back in the future, right? None of this can be done through us. What we're really doing is we're creating a real direct deposit technology like what we have in the traditional financial system, right? So when you get paid, you are asked to put in your account and routing number. Your employer doesn't say, oh, here's a Wells Fargo bank account, get paid into that. If you don't want it, we'll figure out how to withdraw it to your regular account later, right? Okay. And so our system is essentially designed for this future where everyone has their own wallet, whether it be, the Meta Facebook wallet because they want to interact with, their metaverse world, or into, their crypto tag metal wallet, that they only keep on piece of metal. We enable whatever it is that they want to be directly deposited to, and we want to enable essentially every service that has any kind of direct deposit functionality to have a crypto direct deposit functionality that enables people to get paid where and when they need it. And another important thing that I think is going to come through the pipeline is in the future, I think that regulation is going to continue to make it harder and harder for you to be your own bank. You're going to put your money on Coinbase, and the price is going to rise, and then all of a sudden there's going to be some regulation that makes it harder for you to move your money off of a system like Coinbase because you've now passed some kind of threshold because the price went up, and now you can't do that. But if you're getting your paycheck, every single payday into the place that you want it, you're not going to hit those thresholds. And you're going to be able to be your own bank and not run into what I think will be, regulatory barriers to being your own bank in the future.
How does working is not so much as a company, because I think I get this, but how does working as an individual, where my company's not interested in being orange billed, and I want to take a quarter of my salary, for instance, in Bitcoin? How do you guys differ from, let's say, the product that Strike has, where I basically just fill out a second direct deposit form, and every payroll, a quarter of my salary goes to Strike, and I buy my own Bitcoin when it gets there? Are you really different than that for the individual, not the company?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, right? Again, it comes down to like, do you want Strike to be your wallet or not? Strike is a custodial wallet. If you're like you love Bitcoin, but you don't care about custody versus non-custody, Strike could be the right move for you.
Okay.
There are certain wallet services out there that have direct deposit functions. The key thing for us is, do you want to deposit into a non-custodial wallet? Do you want to deposit into multiple different wallets on payday? Right? That's only going to Strike. We can go.
Okay, so that's interesting. Let me make sure I'm clear on that then, because I didn't get that. That's actually really important. So if I do that with Strike, and I'm structured as a corporation, but I'm basically a sole proprietorship and function. So I don't run a payroll on myself. But if I did, I could say I want 25% to go to Strike. Now, the minute that shows up, I can transfer it out, but it does go there first. So what you're saying is that when I get paid, I would have let's say a Bitcoin address with you, and that money goes directly to my non-custodial wallet. I think I kind of missed that. That's actually really important.
Yeah, and you could have it go to 2 or 3 non-custodial wallets. You could have to go 1 custodial, 2 non-custodial, whatever
Okay.
you want there. Same thing with dollars, right? With something like Strike, let's say you didn't want all that going to Strike to go into Bitcoin. You only want some of it. Well, now you have dollars there and in Bitcoin there. With us, you could put your bank account with us and the Bitcoin wallet. So you could actually come in and get your dollars directly deposited into your bank account and your Bitcoin directly deposited into your wallet. So again, there's way less friction involved. Another thing for independent contractors, this is not for employees, we have an invoicing system as well. So we have a sophisticated invoicing platform built for contractors. So you can actually add clients, you can invoice them, emails go out, they can actually pay directly from that invoice, and then it comes in, and you actually have that like reporting and that that you may need from the invoice perspective as well. So we're taking that.
So what you're saying, I want to be sure on this, right? Occasionally, I shouldn't say occasionally, because then I'll get more requests for it, and I hate doing it. Occasionally, I'll do some consulting, and I'll bill for that consulting. And then when I do that, I'm acting as an independent contractor. I'm not on any sort of payroll service. You're saying that I could invoice on my end through Bitwage and receive payments in Bitcoin that way, even though the party on the other end is paying me in Federal Reserve space credits.
Yes, and you could do whatever percentage, and it would go directly into your bank and your wallet, right? It doesn't go into us. It goes directly into like the systems that you have that you actually want the money to be on.
Now, here's an interesting question from Jake, who asks way too many questions, but in this case, he's asking a good one because I had it myself. Changing the addresses. So whenever I do a Bitcoin transaction, I do a new address. I can't remember what it's called, but I have it set up with some DCA I do with Swan, where my wallet is actually generating a new address without me doing anything, and each subsequent payment's going to a separate UTXO. Do y'all have anything like that?
We have something like it. So we don't have the functionality for you to provide an XPub key to us.
That's what it is, yeah.
I guess it is technically a little bit less private for you if you give us an XPub key, because then we would technically, not that we do it, but we technically could sort of generate all of like the public keys attached to that in the future and monitor them. Again, we don't do that, but from the perspective of privacy, it's actually better if you maybe don't provide that. But what you can do is you can provide us with a list of addresses that you generate, and then we will cycle through those. So there will be so we have that privacy option, and it's actually more private for you because we don't have your XPub key. So we're not able to unlimitedly generate from our side all all of your sort of like future public key addresses related to that.
Here's a crazy question, because now you're telling me you do stuff that I didn't even think was doable. What about a person that works for, like, doesn't really work for, but is like gig economy here, that's like an Uber driver or drives for Uber Eats or something? Can they get paid through y'all?
Yeah, we got Uber drivers, we got Ubers, we got Airbnb, we got people literally got their stimulus checks through us. So, you know, we're limited just like from like the capacity of a business like originating the transaction. As long as a business is originating the transaction, we're able to facilitate it.
That is freaking awesome. Also noticed y'all did the first Lightning salary payment. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah. I mean, that was pretty crazy. It was very hard to do, actually. So we got two people involved. We got a professional soccer athlete, and we got the CEO of a professional of a Nigerian Bitcoin company. So they both got their salaries on Lightning. It was very important for us to do it right. You know, I think that it's very boring to just like create a Lightning channel and like, you know, use the Lightning technology, send it to them, because then they're sort of stuck with it, right? They just have to close the channel at that point. It was very important for us to do it the way that we wanted to be done, sort of at a mass scale, which is that they could provide the wallet that they wanted to provide. And then when we pay them, it's connected into sort of the greater, you know, hive mind of the Lightning Network. So that when we paid them, all of that money was available to be spent on the Lightning Network. And this was hard because we actually paid several $1,000s in a single transaction for one of these individuals. And if you ever work with Lightning, you know there's a capacity issue. You're doing under $100, easy.
Yeah.
Try to spend $5,000, you're gonna have issues with routes. And so we actually had to like work with like different players in the ecosystem. One of the biggest players that we worked with are the guys behind the Phoenix wallet. No, not the Phoenix wallet. Basically the Eclair platform. I can't remember it, but he's like one of like the sort of, you know, like a founding entity in the Lightning space. They've created one of the core technologies behind Lightning, similar to Lightning Labs. And they have the largest, I believe they have the largest node on the Lightning Network.
Okay.
And this was, we were connected with them through Mino, who's the guy who connected us. And we were able to connect into the hive mind through them, and they were able to provide the liquidity that we needed to actually get the salary to the person. So my vision for Lightning Payroll is you can provide whatever Lightning, you know, wallet that you want, and we're able to just, you know, pay it out. Of course, we're not going to be able to pay out such huge amounts to people. Well, it'll be sort of smaller. But this is something that we're personally working on for next year, which is a sort of a more you know, mainstream ready version, product ready version of this.
I can see that working because I've always talked about Lightning, money that you hold in Lightning form for Bitcoin being like cash in your pocket. Yeah. So I'm generally not going to be sitting with $2,500 in my Lightning wallet, because if I was going to a bar to hang out with some old buddies and I wanted to pay cash at the bar for whatever reason, I'd go to the ATM and tap out a couple $300. I'm not going to walk into a bar with $3,000 wadded up in my pocket. And I kind of look at holding Lightning, especially in a non-custodial wallet, like if you're holding it in Wallet of Satoshi or something, like holding cash. It's probably less likely to get lost than cash, but it could be lost in some way. And then you want the majority of your Bitcoin sitting on the main chain because it's much more secure, easier to self-custody, et cetera. You don't have to run a Lightning node, balance your own liquidity and all that stuff. So I could see a person maybe wanting like their weekly spend, like they're out, because as Lightning gets more and more acceptable, and I think part of why that's a thing is there's 100 million Lightning wallets out there that most of the people holding it don't know that they're Lightning wallets. So that Cash App is basically a Bitcoin Lightning wallet that people don't even know they have. So I think it's only a matter of time before there's a hell of a lot more spending going on in Lightning in these small dollar amounts than people expect. Right now, I personally do use Strike for some of my Bitcoin stuff, and I don't actually like to spend my Bitcoin.
Sure.
Once it's on chain and it's hodl, baby. I didn't say SODL, I said hodl, right? But like if I go to a store or a restaurant or anything and I see Bitcoin and they take Bitcoin, like a restaurant, I'm going to wait till my check comes, figure out what the tip's going to be, and then I'll deposit instantly with Strike. And then, do you guys want on-chain or do you want Lightning? And hopefully they know what that means. And either way, I'll pay in dollars and they get Bitcoin. And I think there's going to be a lot more stuff like that going on because the tech's there. People are walking around with the tech that don't know they have it. The first time I figured out it dipped. I'm going to buy $200 worth of Bitcoin and send it directly to my hardware wallet without actually buying Bitcoin. My mind was blown. And the more tech we build like that, the more demand for the type of thing you're talking about. One of the most exciting things I heard from you is that I can be an independent contractor invoicing through Bitwage. That is phenomenal to me that you've enabled that. That's not even something when I was excited to get you on that I had even thought was doable. I actually answered the question incorrectly because I figured you had, like there's contractors, they're independent, but they're getting a weekly paycheck. They're not like billing for X amount of hours this week. That's pretty powerful, man.
Yeah. For companies that sign up, we can even do things like all your contractors generate invoices for you so that you have it for record keeping. And then you can aggregate the invoices and generate a single transaction from that. So we're reducing, like significant amount of work and cost and time related to like doing single transactions or managing multiple different kinds of invoices. So, it's not just a payment platform. It's not just a payroll sync up. It's like a, entire interface for you to, leverage Bitcoin to pay your workforces.
Yeah. So the other thing I've noticed is you guys seem to be stacking something else. Professional athletes, specifically soccer players, football, and UFC folks and things like that. What's going on with that? Are you guys making that like part of your marketing push and bringing these guys on, or is it something that's because it is kind of a closed network in of itself that if one person finds out he can do it and they're inside an organization like UFC or soccer clubs or what have you, it's going to spread by word of mouth, or is it kind of a combo?
Yeah. So I think about working with athletes as an education. We technically have been working with athletes for a long time. Many years ago, we even had, a hockey player from the NHL that, they wanted to be hush hush, so we didn't mention them. But I find it very important for education. So yes, we are going out to not all of these players. Some of them have come to us, but a lot of the time we're going out to them. We're educating them, and then we're sort of helping them educate more people, right? I think that Bitcoin payroll is a very important technology, a very important part of adoption, right? Because it allows you to very easily hodl. Because it's a DCA, it's done in a way where you have less exposure to short-term volatility. If it's being offered through your employer, it's also this incredibly easy way to get into it. And then for all of us who are already hodlers, it's a technology that is purely a buy technology. It's not a sell technology, right? And if we get to a point where just like 5% of the United States is the average person getting 5% of their salary in Bitcoin in the United States, that actually turns into about $1 trillion added to Bitcoin every year, right? So how do we get there? I think that it's all part of education, all part of people just kind of understanding what this technology is, why it's important. And I view working with athletes as part of the way to enable that level of education and to get us there. So that's why we're, they're coming to us, but it's also part the reason why we reach out to them and why we
Sure.
educate them and try to work with them to amplify their message.
Man, you need like every agent in your Rolodex, man. Every major sports agent, PGA. I don't care, everybody, because whether it is the right way for society to be or not, I personally don't think it is, but I'm also a pragmatist, and it's the way that it is. People emulate professional athletes.
Yeah.
Like people that, like, if the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys took half his salary in Bitcoin, my nephew and his wife, who I've been trying to accept Bitcoin in their business for 3 years and ain't done it yet,
Mm-hmm.
would go out and start getting paid in Bitcoin. The second that happened, because they're such fanatics I don't know why, but they are. It's not like they have as many Super Bowls as the Steelers or anything, but people do. They emulate athletes, celebrities, and things like that, and it gets people's attention. When a person like Elon Musk just mentions it, it goes up or down depending on how he mentioned it. And so I think it's definitely something that should be harnessed because, again, whether you think people should be idolizing celebrities or athletes or not, they do.
And it's not even that someone has to directly replicate what they do, but it's also just a part of learning about something, right? We get Mateus Nicolau. He said he's not just saying dollar go up. He's talking about inflation in some country. He's talking about how payments are so bad to pay because he's from Brazil, right?
Yeah.
And so this educates people. Maybe they won't just instantly, boom, I'm doing this, but they'll learn about it. They'll say, oh, this is not just money go up scam. This is something else. And maybe they research it and they learn more, right? And I think that's a very important thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So one thing I wanted to ask you about, I saw on your site about 401k services. Mm-hmm. Is that something that would be available to the individual or only the person that worked for a company where the company worked with you?
Yeah. So this is purely a B2B product, the 401k. You can go and use some kind of an IRA service if you wanted to do it as an individual. The main difference between a 401k and an IRA is the amount of money you can put towards it. You can put way more money into a 401k every year. I think it's like $55,000. That might have gone up recently. Whereas an IRA, it's only like $5,500. So we're talking about a 10x difference in the amount of money that you can put away into each of these things. But in a 401k, it does have to be offered by an employer, whereas an IRA can be done through whatever service. And we started this 401k project because there weren't a lot of people sort of working on this at the time, and we wanted to be able to bring together and offer this single experience for companies to offer benefits to their employees with both Bitcoin payroll and 401k, right? 401k is great because of the tax advantages, right? Like a traditional, you can do pre-tax. With a Roth, you do after tax, but you're not paying any money when you when you do a qualified withdrawal when you're 55 years old. But sometimes you might want your time preference for this stuff might not be that long, right? And so then you'll want to get your salary in Bitcoin directly so you could spend it. Also, those environments are heavily regulated. You do need to use a custodian for that solution. And so maybe you don't want all of your Bitcoin, stuck on a single custodian, right? And so that's another reason why you might want to split between the two. Maybe you're willing to take a little bit of risk because of the tax savings kind of thing. And we just wanted to provide the options, the experience of having it all in a single platform.
Gotcha. So you also have a concierge service. What's that all about?
Yeah, so the concierge service, the concept of that. So we pride ourselves with customer support. You're able to reach out. We have a Slack, an actual community Slack channel where we have people monitoring it, while people are awake during the, Western waking hours, you could say. And then, we have a highly responsive customer support as well. The concierge is basically taking that to another level. So for this is mainly for VIPs or like businesses that are working with us with a lot of employees, and we'll like go in person to provide different levels of education, right? So with certain organizations, I can't talk about them right now, but we'll actually go in person and educate an employee base and on like, what is Bitcoin? What does it mean to be your own bank? What are the pros or the cons? Helping people get set up with their wallets and doing that sort of boring wallet education that not a lot of people like to do. And so we provide that to things like athletes or employers who are bringing on their workforces.
Gotcha. Talk a little bit more, because we alluded to this in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
You're making a real difference in people's lives in some of these other countries. It's one thing for us to sit here in America and bitch about inflation or what have you, but the average American ain't seen inflation if you liken it to Argentina or, like you mentioned earlier, Brazil. Can you dig a little bit more into how you're improving the lives of people that are choosing you as a way to receive their incomes in some of these countries? I mean, I just covered last week, there's people literally robbing banks in Lebanon to get their own money out of the freaking bank.
Yeah.
I don't think Americans are really in touch with how harsh things are in some parts of the world.
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing about being American is that the dollar is the reserve currency, right? And there might be things happening out in the East where there's attempts to stop that from happening. But like in Latin America, like everything is dollarized, right? Like you're like the idea of pricing an expensive object like a house in the local currency is like you're like an idiot. You don't know how to you don't have sound financial thought process if you're doing that instead of pricing it in dollars. And that's because you might try to work on a deal and it takes half a year to close, and in half a year you've lost 10% as a result of inflation, right? You might or more, 50%, right? I don't have the data points on the top of my head, but with Brazil, they had a new currency, the Brazilian real. I can't remember how many years ago. Maybe it was 10 or 20 years ago, and it was 1 Brazilian real to the dollar. And now we're talking about 5 Brazilian real to the dollar, right? So they lost a bunch of money that way. Argentine peso is even worse than that. If there's 100% inflation in Argentina, it's not something that's completely unexpected, right? That's how crazy it is. Like you have your life savings and you just lose half of it just by existing, right? And not because you made a risky bet in a stock that crashed. It's because literally you decide to keep your money in your own local currency. So when you're getting paid using our service, we're giving you the freedom to get paid the way you want to get paid. So for a lot of people, that means getting paid in Bitcoin. There are actually a lot of people who do get paid in stable coins as well. And that's just because not everyone fully understands the value proposition of Bitcoin, because we just haven't gotten to a point where the dollar system is completely broken down, right? But so instead they want to get dollars because that's what they're familiar with, that's what they've done in the past, right? I am of the opinion that the stable coin is just a Trojan horse for Bitcoin. If you actually think about there are 2 main barriers to entry to Bitcoin, which is volatility and public-private key cryptography. These are the 2 things that people basically don't know about, don't understand. And if they get past both of these 2 things and understand both of these 2 things, they can actually enter in. And what a lot of people try to focus on is convincing people to get in based off of money go up, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, if you get everyone to understand, but if you go into that, you end up getting like these systems like ETFs that rule the world, and no one actually owns any Bitcoin. But if you teach people about public-private key cryptography and how to be their own bank and how to actually like use money and store money where they want to be, but with stable coins, they might be willing to do that because they're getting that value through stable coins. And then all that has to happen next is essentially, the crushing failure of the dollar. And when that happens, which I hope doesn't happen, too soon, but when it does, people are going to say, okay, where do I store my money now, right? People are worried about the euro breaking down, right? People are looking at the Chinese yuan like, this is a manipulated currency. Where do I go next? Bitcoin is sort of this obvious thing. So if you already know public-private key cryptography and the dollar starts to fail, it becomes a much easier switch, just a click of a button to go from that to Bitcoin. I think that's it's actually still a very important part of the industry. And so we're able to help people now with their issues, whether they want Bitcoin now or they want stable coins now. We're spreading that education, and then ultimately, what I believe is it eventually becomes a more, what's the term, like Bitcoinized world.
Yeah, and I mean, and right now, if I'm as bullish on Bitcoin as anybody, but money that I'm receiving today that I'm going to spend before the end of the month, I want it in dollars. When people say to me, "What's your price prediction for Bitcoin?" We talk about making a TSP 8 ball that you can shake like the Magic 8 ball, and every time you do it, it comes up and says it depends, right? Because that's the real answer. So it depends on a lot of things that could happen this week or this month. People say, "Is Bitcoin an inflation hedge?" It depends. Between now and Friday, or between now and 2030. I have two totally different answers depending on that time preference. So I think the stable coins are really important. Now, will we ever go into full hyper Bitcoinization? Nobody will want dollars anymore. I think we will. I just don't know when. I'm a grandfather. I could be just still a grandfather. I could be a great grandfather by then. I don't know. I don't care. I'm in it for the long haul. But short-term funding, and it's back to being easy to say as an American. I'm doing that in dollars. But the stablecoin option lets the Brazilian give that same answer. Again, I'll talk about money buckets, and there's short-term, mid-term, and long-term money, and those are handled differently. I also think there was some chatter going on in the chat. It'd be interesting to see what you think about this. That what's happening with the euro has hit dollar parity, the pound's about to hit dollar parity. That's kind of insane with the crash of the European and British markets, but it's actually fitting with something I've been forecasting for several years now, and that is dollar globalization. Basically, the dollar eating a lot of global currencies before it itself dies. Because if you take stable coins, and there's chatter with Gensler about pulling them in under FDIC, well, now you've got that assurance, and then a person in Nigeria with a phone can transact in dollars, and it's almost like real dollars. It's as close as you're going to get.
Yeah.
And like you said, though, then there's no on-ramp, off-ramp to going into Bitcoin. Now it's a smooth exchange, and I think the reason the government would do it, or the Fed would do it, is really not the government, isn't because they like Bitcoin. It's because they have a big inflation problem. And I'm not saying it'll work. I'm saying the mind of the globalist is, if I globalize the dollar, I spread the inflation across billions instead of 300 million. And for a while, I diffuse inflation into the whole globe, and that's better for me. But at the same time, it's a Trojan horse. Like, you're opening the door to self-custody, and you're opening the door to immediate transactions and high-speed transactions and the ability to convert to whatever other currency you want to people that never even thought about that before.
And something you brought up was kind of interesting, which is this idea that, like, what if the Fed is doing this because there are capital controls in countries that limit people's access to the dollar, and this is like a way to get around those capital controls. And so, like, the Fed's like, oh, we understand that this is about being able to have a regulatory arbitrage, but we're doing this because there's regulatory arbitrage for our own benefit. but maybe that's like giving them too much credit. and they're not that smart. But it's an interesting way to think that they might have a better understanding than we give them credit for.
Well, when they talk about, and Gensler's mentioned this a few times, pulling stablecoins under FDIC, I don't have another real reason to do that. It's not because they want to protect people, right? The whole idea that they're worried that you will get hurt. They do everything in their interest, not yours. But it's the only thing I can come up with, because the second you do that, then you open that box to diffusion of U.S. capital. And then again, why do I have to prevent capital from going out when capital comes in from everywhere? Basically, I have control of most of the global financial market, more so than, because I already do. I mean, we're the biggest player in the game. Yeah. We can crash economies by winking at them the right way. I'm not for that. Again, I get people mad at me a lot of times. I bring stuff up like this, like, you're advocating. I'm not advocating shit. I'm a weatherman. Right? I'm like, here comes a storm. You're rooting for the storm. No, I'm pointing to the radar and saying there's a storm. Anyway, man, this has been a really fantastic discussion. I'm definitely going to want to have you or someone from Bitwage on again and go deeper into this as you guys continue to innovate. I'm incredibly impressed with the stuff you've done. And don't take this the wrong way, because I don't mean it negatively at all. And you also just look very, very young for someone doing all this stuff and haven't been in the game that long. It's really impressive. You want to tell people how they can learn more about Bitwage, how they can start getting paid in Bitcoin. And we got a ton of independent contractors in the audience. If you want to say anything again about that for people that maybe tuned in a little later, go ahead and do so.
Yeah, I mean, just go to www.bitwage.com. Check us out. We've got a big Twitter game, so at Bitwage, that you can check out as well. I mean, our system works we have a B2B product, so companies can come on and use it. We have a B2C product, which means employees, contractors, freelancers, gig workers in the US or literally anywhere in the world can come up, sign up, and get any percentage of their salary between Bitcoin and various local currencies as they need. So yeah, check us out.
Well, thank you again, Jonathan. This was a fantastic interview. I appreciate you being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.